If someone came into my office and said, "Robin, why do I feel everything so intensely? Why do I know that I'm overreacting, but I can't seem to stop?" I'd probably tell them one of the biggest misconceptions about ADHD is that it's simply a disorder of attention. It isn't. And it's not about thinking differently either. ADHD affects something called executive functioning. Think of executive functioning as your brain's management system. It's responsible for helping you plan, organize, prioritize, shift your brain's attention, control impulses, and regulate your thoughts, your behaviors, and even your emotions. One of those executive functions is called inhibition. Inhibition is our brain's ability to pause before reacting. It helps you stop, think, and choose how you want to respond. And another important executive function is self-regulation. That's your brain's ability to manage your emotions, your attention, and your behavior over time. When those symptoms aren't working as efficiently, it's not that you don't have emotions. Everyone has emotions. The difference is that your brain may have a harder time regulating them. Here's an example I often use. Imagine you're driving a car. The engine works perfectly. In fact, maybe it has a little more power than most. But the brakes, they don't respond as quickly as you would like. The problem isn't that the car moves. The problem is slowing it down once it's already in motion. And for many people with ADHD, that's what emotions can feel like. The emotion itself isn't wrong. Feeling disappointed isn't wrong. Feeling excited isn't wrong. Feeling frustrated, hurt, embarrassed, or even joyful, none of these emotions are the problem. The challenge is that once these emotions get moving, they can feel much harder to slow down. And someone without ADHD might experience frustration, pause, take a breath, and move on. Someone with ADHD may experience the same frustration, but it feels bigger, more intense, and may take a little longer to settle. That doesn't mean they're weak, it doesn't mean they're dramatic, and it certainly doesn't mean they're choosing to react that way. It means that part of the brain responsible for putting the brakes on emotional reactions may not respond as efficiently. Understanding that distinction is incredibly important because when people don't understand what's happening, they often blame themselves. They say, "I'm too sensitive, I need to toughen up, why can't I just let things go?" But once you understand how ADHD can affect emotional regulation, you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and you start asking, "What strategies will help my brain slow things down?" That one shift in perspective can be incredibly freeing. So if the problem isn't having emotions, why can something that seems so small to everyone else feel so overwhelming to someone with ADHD? Let's talk about why things can sometimes create really big emotional reactions. I actually think this is the most important part of the video. This is where people stop watching as students and start thinking, how does she know that's exactly what happens to me? I would also make one important point throughout this section. The intensity of the emotion is real. The interpretation of the situation may not match the intensity of the emotion. That helps viewers understand themselves without feeling judged. So if you've ever had someone tell you that you're overreacting, it's not that big of a deal, why are you so upset? I want you to know that you're not alone. One of the things I hear most often from people with ADHD is, "Robin, I know it shouldn't bother me this much." And that's what can feel so confusing. Logically, you know the situation isn't catastrophic, but emotionally, your brain responds as though it is. Imagine someone interrupts you while you're talking to someone else. It may be a minor inconvenience, but for you, it feels like you weren't heard, or that what you had to say didn't matter. Now, imagine your boss gives you constructive feedback, objectively. You know they're trying to help you improve. You may even agree with what they're saying, but emotionally, it can feel like you failed, like you've disappointed someone, or like you're about to lose your job. Maybe a friend cancels plans. Your logical brain knows people get sick, schedules changes, life happens. But emotionally, your mind starts asking, are they upset with me? Did I do something wrong? Maybe they don't want to spend time with me anymore. Or your spouse forgets to pick up something from the grocery store. To someone else, it's just an honest mistake. But in that moment, it can feel like it doesn't matter. They weren't listening. Why am I always the one remembering everything? Or maybe you send a text message and you see that it's been read and an hour goes by without a response. Logically, you know there are dozens of reasons why someone else may not have replied yet. They're working, they're driving, they're busy with their kids, their phone died. But emotionally, your brain starts filling in the blanks. Did I say something wrong? Are they mad at me? Are they ignoring me? Notice something about all these examples? The event itself isn't always the biggest problem. It's the meaning your brain attaches to the event and how quickly the emotional response builds. And that's why people with ADHD often say, I know I'm overthinking this, or I know this probably isn't true. They're not lacking insight. They often recognize that their emotional reaction is stronger than the situation itself. The difficult part is slowing that reaction down once it's started. Remember the car we talked about earlier? The engine isn't the problem. The brakes are. The emotion isn't wrong. Feelings hurt, frustrated, embarrassed, or disappointed. They are all normal human reactions. The challenge is that your emotional brakes may not engage as quickly as you would like. So the emotions feel bigger, they last longer, and can be harder to bring back down. That doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean that you're dramatic. And it doesn't mean you're choosing to react this way. It means your brain may need a little more time, a few different strategies to slow these emotions down before they take over. And when people hear the phrase emotional dysregulation, they often picture someone who's angry all the time. But that's not what emotional dysregulation looks like for most people with ADHD. So let's talk about all the different emotions it can affect. When people hear the phrase emotional dysregulation, they often picture someone who's angry, someone yelling, throwing things, or losing their temper. And while anger can certainly be part of emotional dysregulation, it's only one piece of the picture. In my experience, many people with ADHD don't struggle with anger nearly as much as they struggle with emotions like sadness, frustration, embarrassment, or shame. Maybe you've cried over something that afterward didn't seem like it should have affected you so deeply. Maybe you've become frustrated so quickly that you surprised yourself, or you made a small mistake, said the wrong thing, forgot something important, and spent the rest of the day replaying it in your mind. Not because anyone else was thinking about it, but because you couldn't stop thinking about it. Sometimes it's embarrassment. You stumble over your own words in a meeting, forget someone's name, or realize you've interrupted someone. Hours later, you're still thinking about it, wondering if everyone noticed, wondering if they think less of you. Sometimes it's guilt. You forget to return a phone call. You missed a deadline. You were late picking someone up. Even after you've apologized, you continue carrying that guilt long after everyone else has moved on. And for many people, anxiety becomes part of the cycle. Not because they're worrying for no reason, but because they've had enough experiences of forgetting, running late, or feeling overwhelmed. And for many people, anxiety becomes part of the cycle, not because they're worrying for the wrong reason, but because they've had experiences of forgetting, running late, or feeling overwhelmed. And then they start anticipating the next mistake before it even happens. But here's something people don't often talk about. Emotional dysregulation isn't only about difficult emotions. It can affect positive emotions too. Maybe you've become so excited about a new hobby, a new project, or a new idea that it's all you can think about. You dive in with incredible energy. You stay up researching it. You want to tell everyone about it. Your enthusiasm is genuine. But sometimes that excitement can become so intense that it crowds out everything else. Or maybe something wonderful happens and your joy feels so big that it's hard to settle back into the rest of your day. The point is, emotional dysregulation isn't about having the wrong emotions. It's about how intensely you experience them and how difficult it can be to shift gears once those emotions are activated. And whenever it happens, excitement, frustration, sadness, embarrassment, or anxiety, your emotions are real. They're valid. The goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to learn how to experience these emotions without letting them take over your entire day. Because having big emotions, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means your brain may need different tools to help you regulate these emotions more effectively. And that's something that can absolutely be learned. But here's the part that often hurts the most. For many people with ADHD, the hardest part isn't the emotional reaction itself. It's what they say to themselves afterwards. So let's talk about shame that so often follows emotional dysregulation. Here's the part that I don't think we talk about enough. For many people with ADHD, the hardest part isn't the emotional reaction itself. It's what happens afterwards. The emotion begins to settle, your heart rate comes down, your thoughts become clearer, and then a different voice shows up. And that voice says, I overreacted. Why did I make such a big deal out of that? I ruined everything. They're probably upset with me now. I always do this. What's wrong with me? And before you know it, the emotion has been replaced by shame. If someone came into my office and told me this, I'd tell them something that often surprises them. The emotional reaction and the story you're telling yourself afterwards are two completely different things. Feeling frustrated, feeling hurt, feeling embarrassed, those are emotions. Telling yourself, I'm too much, I'm broken, nobody's ever going to understand me, those are judgments. And unfortunately, many people with ADHD have been hearing those judgments for years. Maybe someone called you too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic, or told you, just calm down. Eventually, those messages can become your own inner voice. They affect every emotional moment. You don't just recover from the emotion, you start attacking yourself. You replay the conversation. You wonder what everybody else is thinking. You imagine all the different ways that you should have handled it. You promise yourself, next time I'll do better, only to find yourself in the exact same cycle again. And sometimes the shame lasts much longer than the original emotion. And this is the part that breaks my heart, because shame doesn't teach us. It doesn't help us regulate our emotions. It doesn't make us more resilient. It simply convinces us that we are the problem. But what if we look at it differently? What if, instead of saying, I'm overreacted, you ask yourself, what made that situation feel so overwhelming? Instead of, I'm crazy, you ask, what was my brain trying to protect me from? Instead of, I ruined everything, you ask, is there something I need to repair, or am I assuming the worst because I feel ashamed? Those questions don't excuse hurtful behavior. If we say something we regret, it's important to take responsibility, apologize, and make it right. But there's a difference between taking responsibility and punishing yourself. One leads to growth, and the other keeps you trapped in shame. And as a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, one of the things I hope people discover is that self-awareness and self-compassion can exist together. You can recognize that a reaction wasn't helpful without deciding that you are the problem, because the goal isn't to become someone who has never had big emotions. The goal is to understand your emotions, learn from them, recover more quickly, and treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer someone you love. That's not making excuses. That's healing. Unfortunately, when people don't understand what's happening, they often hear messages that make that shame even worse. Let's talk about some of the things people with ADHD hear every day, and why those labels miss what's really going on. One of the hardest parts about emotional dysregulation is that the people around you often don't see what's happening inside your brain. They only see the reaction. They don't see how hard that you've been trying to hold it together all day. They don't see the frustration, the overwhelm, or the effort it took just to make it through the day before that moment happened. They simply see the emotion. And because they don't understand it, they try to explain it. That's when people often hear things like, you're too sensitive, you're overreacting, you're too dramatic, you need to grow up, you're being manipulative. Why don't you just let it go? If you've heard those things, I want you to know something. Hearing those messages over and over doesn't teach emotional regulation. It teaches shame. Instead of thinking, I need better tools to regulate my emotions, people begin thinking, maybe I really am too much. Maybe I'm just difficult. Maybe everyone would be happier if I didn't react this way. And that's heartbreaking, because labels don't teach skills. Calling someone too sensitive doesn't help them learn how to pause before reacting. Calling someone dramatic doesn't teach them how to calm their nervous system. Calling someone immature doesn't explain what's happening in their brain or give them strategies they can actually use. Imagine trying to teach someone to swim, but instead of showing them how, you just keep yelling, swim better. Most of us would recognize that doesn't make any sense. Yet, that's exactly what happens with emotional regulation. People are told to calm down, stop overreacting, don't be so emotional, without ever being taught how. Now, I also want to be clear about something. Understanding emotional dysregulation doesn't mean we're excusing behavior that hurt other people. If we raise our voice, say something hurtful, or react in a way that we regret, we are responsible for repairing that relationship. Understanding why something happened doesn't remove accountability, but it does help us figure out what needs to change. Because you can't improve a skill until you understand the skill that you're trying to build. And emotional regulation is exactly that skill. Some people learn it easily, others need more support, more practice, and different strategies. Neither of those realities say something about your worth as a person. One of the things I often tell people in my office is this: don't judge yourself by your hardest moment. Judge yourself by what you do after it. Did you take responsibility? Did you apologize if you needed to? Did you learn something about yourself? Did you come back and try again? That's growth, not perfection. And that's what we're aiming for. Because the goal isn't to become someone who never feels deeply. The goal is to learn how to experience these emotions without letting them control your relationships, your decisions, or the way that you see yourself. The good news is emotional regulation is something you can improve. So let's talk about what treatment really looks like and why it's about so much more than medication. So if emotional dysregulation is part of ADHD, what actually helps? One of the biggest myths I hear is, Robin, if I can just find the right medication, all of this will go away. I wish it were that simple. Medication can be incredibly helpful for many people with ADHD. For some, it improves focus, impulse control, and even emotional regulation. but medication is just one tool. It's not the entire toolbox. The goal isn't to make you someone different. The goal is to help you become the best version of yourself. And that's why treatment is usually much bigger than a prescription. Let's start with something that surprises a lot of people: sleep. Think about the last time you were exhausted. Were you more patient or less patient? Most of us become irritable, more emotional, and more reactive when we're sleep deprived. For someone whose brain already has difficulty regulating emotion, poor sleep can make these emotional breaks even harder to use. The same is true for stress. When life becomes overwhelming, whether it's work, parenting, school, financial stress, or relationship challenges, your brain has fewer resources available to regulate emotions effectively. That's why it's so important to recognize your stress level is building, because your emotions reaches a boiling point. Regular exercise can help too, not because it magically fixes ADHD, but because movement helps regulate the brain and the body. It can reduce stress, improve mood, and make it easier to think clearly when emotions start to build. Therapy can also be incredibly valuable, not because you're broken, but because therapy helps you understand your patterns, challenging years of self-criticism, and learn practical skills for managing emotions in healthier ways. One of the most helpful things you can do is start learning your triggers and ask yourself, what situations tend to bring out my biggest emotional reactions? Is it criticism, feeling misunderstood, being interrupted, running late, feeling rejected, being overwhelmed? You can't prepare for something if you don't know what tends to trigger it. And once you know your triggers, you can begin noticing the early warning signs. Maybe your shoulders become tense, your heart starts racing, your thoughts speed up, your voice gets louder, or you feel like you have to respond right now. Those are often clues that your emotions are escalating, and that's your opportunity to practice. Sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do is nothing. Not forever, just for a moment. Take one breath, walk into another room, get a glass of water, tell the other person, I need a few minutes and I want to come back to this conversation. That isn't avoiding the problem, that's giving your brain time to put on the brakes before responding. Another simple strategy is to name the emotion that you're experiencing. Instead of saying everything's falling apart, try asking yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Am I frustrated, disappointed, embarrassed, rejected, anxious, overwhelmed? Research has shown that simply putting words to an emotion can help reduce its intensity. It creates a little bit of distance between you and the emotion that you're experiencing. And finally, I want to talk about something that's just as important as any medication that I prescribe: self-compassion. Many people with ADHD have spent years speaking to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they love. I'm so stupid. Why can't I get it together? I always mess everything up. But imagine if your best friend came to you after having a difficult day. Would you call them lazy, weak, a failure? Probably not. You would remind them that one difficult moment doesn't define who they are. And you deserve the same kindness, because emotional regulation isn't about becoming perfect. It's about recognizing what's happening, using the tools that you've practiced, repairing things if you need to, and moving forward instead of staying stuck in that same shame. Progress won't happen overnight. There will still be hard days. There will still be moments when you react in ways that you wish you hadn't, and that doesn't mean that you failed. It means you're human. And every time you recognize a trigger a little earlier, pause before responding. and show yourself some compassion instead of criticism. You're strengthening a skill, just like any other skill. It gets better with practice. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's this. Having big emotions doesn't mean you're broken. It means your brain may need different strategies, not more shame. Let's leave you with one final thought. I love ending with this because it does something that many ADHD videos doesn't. It speaks to the person with ADHD and the people who love them. It also leaves viewers with hope instead of just information. So before we finish, I want to speak directly to the spouses, parents, children, friends, and everyone else who loves someone with ADHD. If you've ever watched someone you care about have a big emotional reaction, it can be a bit confusing. You might think, why are they making such a big deal out of this? Why can't they just let it go? Why are they still upset? Those are understandable questions. But here's what I want you to know. The emotions they're experiencing is real. They aren't pretending. They aren't choosing to feel overwhelmed. They aren't trying to make your life difficult. Their nervous system is responding in a way that feels very real to them. That doesn't mean every reaction is helpful, and it doesn't mean hurtful behavior should be ignored. We are all responsible for how we treat the people that we love. But understanding what's happening allows us to respond differently. One of the most powerful things you can say to someone in that moment isn't, calm down, or you're overreacting. Instead, try saying, I can see that you're really overwhelmed right now. Let's slow this down together. I'm here when you're ready to talk. Feeling understood doesn't instantly make emotions disappear, but it often helps people regulate more quickly than feeling judged. And if you're the person with ADHD, I want you to hear something too. Your goal isn't to stop having emotions. You're human. You're supposed to have emotions. The goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to learn how to respond in a way that's consistent with the person that you want to be. That's a skill. And like any skill, it gets stronger with practice. So if there's one thing I want you to remember from today's video, it's this. The next time you catch yourself saying, I'm too emotional, I want you to pause and ask yourself a different question. What made my nervous system react that strongly? That's a completely different conversation. One question leads to shame, the other leads to curiosity. Shame tells us something is wrong with me. Curiosity asks, what can I learn from this? And that shift can change everything. Because when you become curious instead of critical, you create room for growth. If someone came into my office and said, Robin, will I always react this way? I would tell them no. Because emotional regulation isn't something you're simply born knowing. It's something that you've learned. Some people learn it naturally. Others have to work at it a little more intentionally, and that's okay. The first step is understanding what's happening. The second step is giving yourself permission to practice, not perfection. There still will be very difficult days. You'll still have moments when you'd wish they'd gone differently. I know I do. You're human. The goal isn't to become someone who never feels deeply. Some of the most compassionate, creative, and empathetic people that I've ever met feel emotions very deeply. The goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal is to learn what to do with those feelings, to recognize them earlier, to respond more intentionally, to repair relationships when you need to, and to treat yourself with the same kindness that you would offer someone you love. Because emotional regulation isn't about becoming a different person. It's about learning how to work with your brain instead of spending your life fighting against it. And that's where healing begins. I'd love to hear from you. When's the first time that you realized, I don't think I'm reacting the way that I want to? Or, What's one situation that tends to trigger a bigger emotional reaction than you'd like? Share your experience in the comments below. One of the things I love most about this community is that when people share their stories, others realize they're not alone. If you found this video helpful, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need to hear this today. You can also follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok for more evidence-based mental health education that's easy to understand. And if you live in North Carolina and you're looking for a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation or ongoing mental health treatment, you can learn more about my practice by visiting the website below. And remember, the right treatment starts with the right diagnosis, and the right diagnosis starts with asking the right questions. Until next time, be kind to your mind.